I think everything happens for a reason. And I think that had I not done the exact journey that I did and the way that I did it, I wouldn't be where I am today. And I like where I am today.
Just heard Mary Pritchard from Boise State University in Boise, Idaho. Eric interviewed Mary for episode 206 of Psych Sessions, Conversations about Teaching and Stuff.
Hi folks, this is Garth, and I want to tell you about an intro psych book from Sumo Learning. That's SOOMO. The book is called Psychology in the Real World by author Jennifer Harper. Sumo and Harper have taken seriously the APA-IPI recommendation that scientific inquiry and research methods should be the foundation for all content areas. So they built research spotlight activities into every chapter with focus on identifying and evaluating scientific claims, which is the applied stuff that we all want our students to be able to do coming out of this course. It's got LMS integration and auto-grading and supplements like slides and test questions and notes, and it's affordable at only $50. So check it out. Go to sumolearning.com, that's SOOMO learning.com, and get a preview of psychology in the real world.
The Psych Sessions podcast is sponsored by STP. That is the Society for the Teaching of Psychology. That's APA Division 2. You can find them at teachpsych.org. The views or product endorsements expressed do not represent the views, support, or endorsements of STP. Psych Sessions is so grateful to have STP as a long-term supporter. Psych Sessions is proud to partner with Macmillan Learning. At Macmillan Learning Psychology, content matters, and these days, digital content matters more than ever. Macmillan Learning's Achieve elevates interactive teaching and learning with an extraordinary range of online course content in a powerful yet easy-to-use platform. Interactive ebooks, innovative assessments, engaging videos and activities, helpful instructor resources. Achieve brings it all together and makes it easy for you to find what you need and what you want. See for yourself. Go to macmillanlearning.com/psych sessions for an introductory tour today. Macmillan's Achieve for Psychology, engaging every student, supporting every instructor, setting the new standard for teaching and learning.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Psych Sessions, Conversations about Teaching and Stuff. I am here today chatting with, interviewing one of my all-time favorite people and a dear friend, Dr. Mary Pritchard from Boise State University. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Eric. I am thrilled to be here.
And for people who, it's really fun to interview your friend because, you know, there's shortcut language that we can use. So, for example, listeners don't know, was Mary's first response sarcastic or not? We're not sure, so I'll let you clarify. Are you happy to be here, or you're just happy not to be doing something else right now, or?
I am happy to be here because when I have a conversation with you, it usually results in spontaneous laughter, and that's good for the soul.
It is good for the soul, and, you know, I'm not always taken seriously. What are the three words? I'm not always taken
stoic, serious, and scholarly.
I'm not always considered that, but hopefully you know me well enough that I can qualify for 2 out of the 3.
Okay, but we have to tell the story of where those words came from.
Okay, Mary, it's all yours. Please tell the story.
It is, as we are recording this, it is the first week of classes. And after Dr. Landrum, Eric's first day of class, one of his students came to me and she said, "He's not who I thought he would be." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "I thought he'd just be like more scholarly and, you know, like more stoic and serious." And I said, as I'm chuckling on the inside with a straight face, I said, "First of all, he is very scholarly. However, he is not always known for being serious and stoic because he wants you to have fun as you are learning."
I really appreciate that. I probably owe you at least $20 as being my PR person. I really appreciate that. And I also think it's kind of cool that students trust you that much to reveal that, right? Because I think a lot of times students don't talk about, or they want to talk about other faculty members with a different person, but they don't.
Right.
So, I mean, that's actually really more of a tribute to you that student felt comfortable enough to say, I thought this one dude was going to be this way, but it turns out he's that way.
I do know the student pretty well. I was her first advisor when she came to orientation at Boise State. And so we've got a little bit of a history, and I think that she feels comfortable since I was the first one who told her what classes to take to come talk to me about her classes.
Well, and I think there's a moral to that story that I want our listeners to kind of come away with, is that you are so dedicated to students. You're so student-centered, whether it's orientation, whether it's the programming that you're doing on campus, your research program. And I want to try to talk about all those things. I don't have it mapped out perfectly because you can see the copious notes that I have in front of me. So I'm just kind of, but I've done this once or twice, between me and Garth, 206, 207 episodes. And so I do kind of have a game plan. So,
okay.
So as you just said, we're at the very beginning of a new semester. So what are you teaching?
I am teaching the psychology of eating, and I run our internship program in the psychology department. So there's an online class component that goes with that. So
do you get the sense that the psychology of eating is a popular course around the country? Is that a kind of a niche course to Boise State, or that's a standard course like abnormal and cognitive and developmental?
It is not a standard course. It is something that I developed, probably 15 years ago. And there is no textbook because when I first started teaching the class as a special topics course, there was a book I could use as a textbook, but I believe it's from 2010. And so it's way too outdated now. And so I just source materials myself.
Well,
and I know where you're going with this.
Well,
so for the listeners, we have known each other for 21 years.
Yeah, at least. Yeah.
So it's been over 2 decades of hilarity.
So
and shared walls.
So I'll just do the shortcut: necessity, mother, invention. I'm shocked that you're not working on your own psychology of eating textbook, because I would think in today's culture, with the emphasis on health or abnormality or being overweight or underweight, I would think that a book like that could be super popular.
Yeah. And I've got drafts of said book.
Not surprised.
From a few years ago. I haven't had much time to work on it lately. But as you and I were chatting in the hallway the other day, I was trying to do a trade publication, not an academic publication. So I was able to get an agent, but not able to get a book deal. And I think once I'm out of my administrative stint and I have a little bit more time, I want to revisit that project, because I do think that it is a worthy book to write.
Absolutely. And I think that the creative angle would be that it's a scholarly book,
right?
In terms of some celebrity's opinion about health and wellness and beauty and, all the things that we see on the internet or TikTok or Facebook or Instagram kind of thing. So I think the scholarly angle would be really something fairly unique.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the students are blown away by some of the things we talk about in that class.
So let's talk about that a little bit. So for our listeners, is it a popular class?
It is a popular class. It's full and waitlisted every time I offer it. I just got an email this morning from a student who wanted a permission number. The class is literally full to room capacity. I'm going to have to steal some chairs from somewhere just for my teaching assistants.
And that's at Boise State, that's a 200 level sophomore class.
It is.
But it's not just psychology majors, is that right?
Correct. I've got students from all across campus who take that class out of interest.
Yeah. Now, for psychology majors, it helps satisfy one of their cluster requirements under the current curriculum. But for those other students, is that an elective for them?
It's just an elective.
Yeah, I think that speaks to the popularity and the importance of that class and those topics that you're talking about. Yeah. But go ahead.
I've got students in there. We talk about all kinds of things related to eating, including things like body image and eating disorders. And so every day after the first day of class, and even during office hours yesterday before the first day of class, I have students coming in telling me their stories about their issues with eating. I have parents who are we're still a semi-non-traditional campus. So I have parents who are in that class who came up to me after class and were like, you know what, my daughter has an eating disorder. And so I'm taking this class because I want to learn more about it. So I think that the topic touches home for a lot of people on a personal level.
Yeah. And I think there's an interesting challenge in there in that, again, for our listening audience, you're not a trained clinician or counselor, yet you have people coming up after a class saying, I think my daughter, I'm making this up, obviously. I think my daughter has anorexia.
Right.
Or I think my son is bulimic or something like that. And so how do you tiptoe that? You know, you've got a ton of expertise in the area, but yet you're not a clinician or a counselor.
I'm not. And I think, I don't know if this is true. This is just something I suspect that might be one of the reasons why people are more comfortable coming to talk to me, because they don't think I'm just analyzing them as we're having a conversation.
Right.
But I'm also well connected. So I am part of the Eating Disorder Professionals of Idaho group. And most of the members, or 99% of the members, are in the field in terms of either being registered dietitians that are certified to treat eating disorders or counselors and clinicians that are certified. There's a special certification you have to treat patients with eating disorders. And so I'm well connected. And so if a student or a parent comes to me and says, hey, I'm struggling, if they're a student on our campus, I can, of course, refer them to our campus wellness center, although we no longer have anyone certified in treating eating disorders on staff. But I've got a lot of counselors in the Valley I can send a referral to, and I do that.
Well, and you're being very polite and saying, and you're being very humble and saying that you're well connected, but you're also a researcher in this area.
I am.
And so talk a little bit about that.
Oh, it started 26 years ago. I went to graduate school and I studied jury deliberation and I studied stress and law students. I did not study eating disorders. I did not study body. I mean, that's like kind of furthest thing from the truth.
Is that as a social psychology?
Social psychology.
Okay.
It was experimental psychology, but that at my graduate school was cognitive and social and basically research.
Gotcha.
So I was trained to be a researcher. And I was doing my jury deliberation work and talking to lawyers and doing all of that good stuff. And my first semester post PhD, I was teaching at this tiny liberal arts college in Indiana. And a student came to me in tears. It was, midway through the first semester. And I had never had a student in tears in my office before. So that was a new professor. It was something that was a little stressful. And she came running in and I said, what's wrong? What can I do to help you? And she said, you have to help me. And I'm like, okay. She said, I need to lose 10 pounds by the end of this week. And I was like, what, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Let's back up the bus here. So this is a student athlete. This is a D2 school. So she was on the cheerleading squad and she was on the gymnastics team at this particular school. And her cheer coach had told her if she didn't lose 10 pounds by the end of the week, which at this point I think would have given her 3 days from when she came to talk to me to when her goal was, she would no longer be able to be on the top of the pyramid. Her tops, which apparently if you're in cheerleading, being on the top part of the pyramid is like the best thing. Right?
Okay.
So I did not know that until she informed me of that. And she said, you have to help me. I have to figure out how to lose 10 pounds in a week. And I'm looking at this student. She's a gymnast. She's a cheerleader. She is solid muscle. Like, I'm thinking to myself, from where? I'm thinking to myself, this is so wrong. How could your coach pressure you to do this? And so I told her, I said, I don't think that would be a healthy choice for you. And she said, you don't understand the kind of pressures athletes fall under. And she was right. I was not a collegiate athlete. I wasn't on scholarship for athletics going to college. I didn't know what the pressures were like. She was a psychology major. She wanted to go to graduate school so she could become a therapist. And that conversation evolved into us studying, doing a research study on the pressures that collegiate athletes face from their coach, from their team members when it came to body image, nutrition, athletic performance. And I started talking to a bunch of I talked to wrestlers about the way they binge and purge before a meet. I talked to track athletes about maintaining their weight. I talked to gymnasts. I talked to athletes from both what we considered lean sports, which are weight-based sports, and non-lean sports, which are not weight-based. And this evolved into now over 2 decades 25 years of research and body image eating disorder. And I've expanded, from collegiate athletes. My main focus now is just college students in general. But over the course of all of those 25 plus years, I've talked to parents, I've talked to students, I've talked to teenagers, I've talked to, elementary school kids. I've talked to so many people about how they feel about food and about their body.
So what clicked there? So first off, thank you for sharing that story. I don't think I've ever heard that story in our 21 years together as colleagues and friends. But Mary, that strikes me as extraordinary because a student comes to you and shares a personal problem, and you turn that into a collaborative relationship where you start doing research with the student. So it makes me think about this. Was it the topic that supercharged you, or was it the student, or a combination? Because here's what I'm thinking. What if the student, the same person, was it a young woman?
Yes.
Right? Yeah, right. Sure. Okay. Yeah. And gymnast, although I shouldn't make assumptions, but yes. Yeah. Okay. What if this young woman had come to you and said, I'm having severe panic attacks and I have social anxiety. And if I can't get up and give a speech in my debate class, I'm going to lose my scholarship. I'm just making this up from whole cloth. So would you have done the next 2 decades in social anxiety research because of her? Or is there something? That's a remarkable story, quite honestly.
Yeah.
That, you go to grad school, you specialize, you do your dissertation on one thing, and then you do, I don't even think it's a 180 or a 360. It might be a 720. Yeah. There's multiple spins in there. And so do you have a sense of how that clicked with you?
I think it's both. I mean, I've done plenty since then. I've done a lot of projects with students that have been independent study projects where it was their idea. I mean, you and I both have been heavily involved in the McNair Scholars Program. Those are student-driven research ideas. But most of them don't turn into areas of focus for me. It's a one-off, right? And so I think it was the right topic, and I saw a need in the literature. And I started, as I talked to more students in this initial project, I started to see how many students were suffering and how understudied it was at that time. And so it just struck with me. And so, yes, it was that student. Obviously, she graduated. She moved on. 25 years later, I'm still studying body image and eating disorder. And I've studied a lot of other things in the process, but that's the thing that I always come back to.
Can you share what school that was? The D2 school?
University of Evansville.
Okay.
You've never heard of it.
But it's in Indiana. Indiana.
Yeah.
I've heard of the College of Southern Indiana. Is that also in Evansville?
Yes, there are 2 colleges. This tiny factory town that happens to have 2 universities, one private and one public.
Okay, I think I've heard of CSI, so to speak.
Yeah.
I just don't think I've heard of the other one. And so how long were you there for?
I was there for 5 years.
For 5 years? And were you on the tenure track?
I was.
And then were you about to apply, or had you already applied?
I had been encouraged to apply a year early. And instead, I went on the job market.
That's an interesting turn of events. 5 years.
5 years. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And so when you went on the job market and you talked about, your research statement, or you went and gave a talk at a school, was it about jury selection, or was it about bodies?
It was about jury deliberation.
It was about jury deliberation.
But in my research statement, I talked about both.
Okay. When was the last time you did a jury deliberation study?
Oh, wow. Not too long after I got here.
At Boise State.
I got really frustrated with that line of research.
So we're in 24, so that had to be 03?
I got here in 04.
04.
Probably, I want to say the last paper I published on jury deliberation had to be 2006, 2007. I mean, it was quite some time ago. And that was the last study I did.
When you got here, there was a colleague here who has now since retired, Charles Hans.
Yes.
Did you collaborate with him here at the very beginning at all? Or?
I did not, no.
Because I would have thought he would have been excited to have you in the sandbox.
He studied eyewitness testimony.
Okay. And
Yeah.
I guess to you, those are two wildly different things. To me, they're in the same sandbox, right? Yeah.
They're both psych and law. But when I got here, we had, not shockingly, a space issue. And I didn't have a lab space big enough to run mock juries, which is how I studied jury deliberation for the first few years I was here. So I was just still publishing data I'd collected while I was at University of Evansville. And it was the process of combo of like not really being able to continue that line of research when I first got here because we didn't have space that I needed to do that kind of study. And over the years, just becoming increasingly frustrated with the fact that no one cared. And so I would go talk to lawyers, right, about my research, and all they wanted to know was, okay, but how do I win the case? And I'm like, okay, but that's not, never mind.
They weren't interested in the scholarship of what you were doing. They could care less
about the scholarship.
But they did care about the applied nature of what you were doing in your lab.
In a way that would benefit them. And I was like, okay, I guess that's your job, is to win the case regardless of the facts. So I just got frustrated. And so I needed to find a research topic. I mean, I was already studying body image and eating disorders, and I needed to have a research topic so I could have the research pipeline when I first got here as an untenured faculty member. And so I hit the ground running with body image studies while I was here, kind of waiting for space to become available to continue the second line of research. And then at some point in those first couple of years here, I was like, you know what? There's no space to do it. I'm tired of studying jurors. I'm not getting anywhere. I feel like I'm actually making a difference in people's lives with my body image work. That is much more rewarding. And now, especially that it's morphed into more prevention efforts, so much more rewarding than the jury deliberation work ever felt to me. Yeah. So I gave up the jury deliberation, and I just trudged ahead with this as my main line of research. And again, student project on the side, McNair Scholars, et cetera. Sometimes we'll take the foray into alcohol abuse or, road rage or whatever the student happens to want to do. But it always, for me, it comes back to this. I've built my lab around body image and eating disorder prevention.
And this is the beauty of a PhD, is that it's a big enough Swiss Army knife that you could be trained to do one thing as a graduate student, but you had the underlying skill set to then go get your first job and get interested in a new topic, go get your second job, and now all of a sudden, you're not studying the thing that you did your dissertation on, but you didn't have to go back to school to get new skills or get new certifications or get a new statistical technique, because you had all the skills in that big Swiss Army knife when you graduated with your doctorate.
Yeah. That was the beauty of the experimental psychology degree, is that I was literally trained to be a researcher. Didn't matter what the topic was. I mean, certainly I had the topics I studied in grad school, and that's typically what people build their careers off of. Although you and I think didn't do that, because your research has gone far and wide since your training as a cognitive psychologist.
Oh, and again, this podcast is not about me, but I'm very eclectic. Yeah. I mean, I actually did an analysis a few years back on what have I studied and how many things have I published. And I think there's at least 15 different topics on my CV that I might have published 2 to 3 times on. So unlike you, where you've taken a deep dive into a body image and you've become a campus, a regional, and a national expert, I just didn't take that route. And I'm okay with that. And I'm okay with others taking a different route.
Yeah.
So we've kind of gone chronologically in reverse order, which is really interesting. And so I want to ask a little bit about undergraduate and then maybe even high school, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And if you do mind, we can just edit this out.
No,
and
let's do it.
So here's the classic question that I ask all the time of people who are on the podcast. It's kind of a meme for me now. Okay. So when you were growing up, was the conversation in your home about going to college or what college you would go to?
It was more of what college I would go to. There was always an expectation that I would go to college. My father was college educated. My mother was not. And she felt that held her back.
Interesting.
She still in her 70s feels that has held her back in life. And I mean, again, that's very different generation, very different things that were happening when they were growing up. But it was always, when I was growing up, if I did not get an A, I was tutored in that subject over the summer until I could do A-level work. I mean, there was a level of perfectionism in my household growing up around my academics.
And was that, I'm assuming that was extrinsically motivated by your mother and father and not intrinsically motivated by you. That I want to learn more because I got a B+.
Right. No. I hated algebra. And I had to be still tutored in it for 2 summers in a row. That was not my choice.
Mary, what's really fascinating about this is that, and I don't want to make too much of this connection, and I'm doing armchair psychology, right? But it strikes me that there's a parallel between the pressure that your parents put on you to be a perfect student and the pressure that coach put on that student to be 10 pounds lighter to be at the top of the pyramid.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. I mean, it's the process of internalization, right? I mean, it starts out very extrinsically motivated, but over time, you begin to take that in yourself, and it becomes very much an intrinsic level of motivation. And so when I look, back at my childhood, it's like, oh, well, no wonder I'm a perfectionist now. When it's expected of you your whole life, of course you're going to probably take that in, or you rebel, one or the other, right? You take it in or you rebel.
And perfectionism really helps people advance in many ways.
Yes.
It's just that it can become maladaptive.
Exactly.
If you have to be a perfectionist in your drive home, a perfectionist in your taxes, a perfectionist with every word you say in a college classroom, then putting that kind of pressure on yourself could be detrimental.
Yeah.
But in general, I think being a perfectionist could have lots of benefits.
Yeah. I mean, I think you've got to get a PhD in any topic, you've got to have some drive to get the work done, because in graduate school, there's usually not somebody looking over your shoulder, making sure you've done your homework. It's on you. Right? At some point, there's that switch that it's got to become intrinsically motivated if you're going to accomplish the goals that you set out for yourself. So it served me well. But
did it serve you well, or just did it serve you well, period?
It served me well, but.
Okay.
I call myself a recovering perfectionist now.
Okay. Hi, I'm Mary. Hi, Mary. we can do the greeting if you want to. Yeah.
Because you're right. I mean, it serves you well until it doesn't. And when it becomes maladaptive, it's like, okay, we gotta draw back here.
And so did mom and dad push you to go to graduate school way back when, or?
There was always an expectation I would go on beyond college. My dad wanted me to be a lawyer, so he wanted me to go to law school, which I actually did for a very brief stint, and I hated it, so that didn't work out.
Put a pin in that because we're coming back to that. Sorry.
My mom wanted me to be an artist, but she wanted me to be a college-educated artist. But ultimately, when I was a kid, I didn't want to be a psychologist. I wanted to be a veterinarian.
Yeah, who does?
Right.
I mean, do we know any 5-year-olds who say, I want to be a psychologist when I grow up? They want to be firefighters. They want to be vets.
Right.
They might want to be a physician or a police officer,
Yeah.
Yeah, the things that they can see easily in the world, and there's lots of TV shows about typically. It used to be.
Yeah.
So you went to law school? You took a class? What happened there?
So it's kind of like a minor. So when I went to graduate school, University of Denver happens to have a law school.
Just happens to
have a law school. And I was studying psychology of law. I was studying jury deliberation. And so we had to declare a couple of minors. So I did one in stats, and that's, 5-6 classes of graduate level work. And I did one in law. And so the law school let me come in and kind of cherry pick some classes. And there were some that I liked. There were some that I didn't like. And so at one point I talked to the registrar of the law school about enrolling as a law student and getting a JD along with my PhD. But then I found out I'd have to start over, and the classes I took, I would have to retake because they didn't count because I went, all the things. And I was like, this is not worth it. And the classes that I wanted to take, I already took. And so then my classes would have been stacked with things that I didn't want to take and really weren't relevant for my career goals.
So you didn't take just one law school class. You took 5 or 6.
Yeah, I did.
It's an interesting way to figure out what you don't want to do.
Yeah. It's very much akin to doing, I run the internship program here. It's very much akin to doing an internship. And I always encourage our undergraduate students to do that. It's trying a career on for size. Better find that out earlier in life than get the degree and realize you hate it.
That's right. You don't want to go to law school and hate the rest of your life, work-wise, because you're doing something that is lucrative but doesn't fill your soul at the same time. Okay. So let me ask about the Mary Pritchard of high school, if I could. So I have a list here, not physical, but in my head. And let me, just so that I don't appear overly biased, let me try. So were you in band? Were you an athlete? Were you a cheerleader? Were you in debate? Were you in drama? Were you a volunteer in the community? What kind of high school student were you?
First and foremost, I studied because that was the rule, right? You do your homework before anything else in life. You have to have your homework done on Friday night or Saturday morning or whatever. You can't do anything until that's done. So I was very studious, which of course made me super popular. I was a nerd. I did like theater. So I was in like drama club and I did productions. As long as I kept my A's, I was allowed to do outside activities.
So were you on the stage or were you behind the scenes?
Both.
In theater?
I was on the stage and then I would also be the student director, depending on how I got cast.
A student director?
Yeah.
I can definitely see that. So do you remember what was your favorite play that you were in or your favorite role? Do you have any recollection of that at all?
The importance of being earnest. I was the lead female, Cecily, and it was like 8th or 9th grade. I mean, it was a really long time ago, but I loved that play and I loved being on stage. And so now I'm just on stage in the classroom instead of doing performance art.
I think you're actually making a very serious point. Those skills that you learn in theater, whether it's high school or college or whatever, carry over to being a college professor in the classroom.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a psychology major as an undergraduate, but I was a double major. The other one was speech communication and theater arts.
Yeah.
And when I was in plays in high school and college, I guarantee that gave me confidence to get up in front of 300 people in intro psych and do my thing. And so I think there's some really transferable skills between those two things.
Yeah.
Does anybody on the planet have any pictures of you being in plays?
Oh, I'm sure my mother does somewhere.
Oh, and do you have those or do you have scans of those?
I don't have scans of those.
Oh, you need to, before that ephemera kind of fades away, you need to make sure, if nothing else for me, you need, and I'll do the same because I have a handful of pictures from when I was in plays in high school and college.
Yeah. I'm sure my mother has them in a warehouse somewhere. In a scrapbook.
In a
or
warehouse. Okay.
She might have them in her apartment. I don't know.
Yeah.
She was very meticulous about keeping photo albums back then because we had were, it was before digital photos. It was before we had smartphones. So you had Polaroid pictures or you had cameras and then you had to take them to the shop to get the film developed.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So somewhere those pictures exist.
There's probably a Kodak envelope that has the pictures and the negatives.
Yeah.
They're together.
If she didn't put them in a scrapbook, then yeah.
Oh my gosh. I'm pretty sure I've asked you this before, but I'll ask you for the listening audience. Do you have any brothers and sisters?
I do not.
Okay. So you were the only child.
I was it.
And how old were your parents when you were born?
Late 20s.
That's pretty young.
27, 28.
That's fairly young.
Back then, it was kind of old.
Was it?
But for today's, I think.
Maybe I'm thinking of, I'm doing a very simple comparison to my own family. When I was born, my mother was 38, my father was 39.
But you were the baby.
I was indeed. And they had a son 19 years prior to me.
Right.
And they were 18 and 19 respectively. So I guess, my comparison doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, I mean, I think back then, straight out of high school, most people were having kids, whereas now it tends to be early 30s, early to mid 30s. Yeah.
I think that's correct.
Things have changed.
Yeah. All right. So tell me a little bit about what you're passionate about these days. It could be a teaching topic. It could be a research topic. It could be something for your, What are you applying your perfectionism to these days?
How long do you got?
You've been very kind with me. We've probably got maybe 20 more minutes if I don't overstay my welcome.
Okay. The thing that I am loving and so passionate about right now is actually more research related, but also kind of morphing into teaching related. So as I talked a little bit about earlier with my body image, eating disorder prevention work is really turning more into prevention. And so this past year, we were able to bring the Be Body Positive curriculum to campus.
Okay.
And so that was piloted last year. We're now actually offering 1 credit workshop. So students can sign up to take that. It's an eating disorder prevention course. But what we realized in this past year is that it was designed for women. And so men don't relate very well to it. And so my graduate student and an undergrad and I spent our summers developing curriculum for men. And we are pilot testing it in like 2 weeks. And I am really excited about this curriculum we've developed for men.
Is there, and knowing you, Mary, I have a feeling that you're doing all this curriculum development work and you're offering pilot courses and you're doing it for free or next to free.
Yes.
So, but if you're developing a brand new curriculum for men that's parallel to the topics that the curriculum for women or focuses on women is prepared for, isn't there a potentially lucrative or financial something that, I mean, when people invent new things and they start offering them and people start getting excited about them, that's an opportunity usually to make some money in many aspects of the world.
For me, it's not about money. It's about getting it out there. And so the Be Body Positive folks know that we're doing this. And if it works, if these pilot tests work, they would love to adopt that as part of their internationally offered curriculum. One of our colleagues has pointed out that I need to get myself a lawyer or a patent lawyer or some sort of person who does copyright and all of that good stuff. And so we haven't done that yet because we literally just finished designing the curriculum. We need to pilot test it and probably tweak it a little bit first. But before we do anything more nationally or internationally based, I will talk with folks who know what they're doing about intellectual property.
And I think sometimes what I tend to fear is that, if something becomes successful that you've done or I've done, Boise State's going to think they own a piece of it.
Right.
And legally they might in terms of intellectual property. But if Boise State's going to get a piece of it, I don't understand, and I know you feel differently about this, but why not you get a piece of it as well? I mean, I guess you could say you're rolling these efforts into your research.
I am.
I guarantee you're going above and beyond whatever percentage of your workload you've allocated for research. I guarantee you're doing more. The perfectionist, right, would do more than, if 20% of your workload is research, I guarantee you're allocating more than 20% of your time, expertise, effort into that area.
Yeah.
This is the way that I know you and that the way that you're constructed.
Yeah.
Is that, you'll do that. It's really funny. I think we've had this conversation before. You're supposed to add your teaching, research, service, and administration, which we should come back and talk about a little bit. And those should equal, 50% each semester, and over 2 semesters equal 100%.
Right.
We're getting more than 100% out of you. Thank you. And it worries me sometimes.
Yeah.
It seriously does.
Yeah. But this research is what fills me. It's what fills my soul. It's what I love doing.
Yeah. Yes, period. Then, new sentence. However, universities have a really long track record of eating their own, meaning we'll let you work your ass off.
Yeah.
We'll let you work yourself to the bone. And it's your passion. Awesome. Look how hard Mary's working for free.
Right.
And I think, and not just Boise State, but I think almost every university on the planet is probably guilty in some pocket of that university of leveraging, maximizing, manipulating. Good people will do things out of the kindness of their heart because they're passionate about it and make the university look good, make themselves look good, but do it on the cheap.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll change topics. Very, very nicely done. Let's see. What else? Let's talk about your recent leadership experience.
Okay.
And so won't you tell our listeners a little bit about that role that you play for the Department of Psychological Science?
So I am, thanks in large part to the gentleman sitting across from me.
I'm getting the blame or the credit. I'm not quite sure how that works.
The associate chair of our department. I'm starting my third year in that role, and it's a 3-year term. So I will be passing the baton on to one of our colleagues in July of next year.
So what does the associate chair do?
The associate chair, because we invented this job on our campus when we realized that we had more majors and minors than one person being the chair could actually handle, and more jobs and responsibilities, we kind of divide and conquer the main responsibilities. And so the associate chair is tasked, I think the biggest responsibility of the associate chair is overseeing our advising program. So we have an advising services coordinator who directly reports to me, and I help her train and run the advising program, which sees our 850 majors and 300 plus minors. And that's a lot of work. I mean, just dealing with the daily kind of student issues, especially when you're first coming back to the beginning of the semester, people are dropping and adding classes and having all sorts of issues. So that's, I think, the bulk of the time of that role is spent with the advising program. I also run the internship program. I'm responsible for our concurrent enrollment. I'm the liaison to that office on campus, and then I meet regularly with our concurrent enrollment faculty that are out teaching in high schools, and just doing whatever else needs to be done in terms of committee work. But
you're leaving a big one off. You also supervise our adjunct faculty.
I do supervise our adjunct faculty, yeah.
And you provide training opportunities for them as well, and as well as evaluations.
Yes.
Yeah, those 3 legs of the stool are that sounds like a full-time gig.
Yes, it feels like that sometimes.
Yeah, just because of the volume and the importance of what those people are doing.
Yeah.
And who they're reaching, and as the volume as well as importance.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds like a lot.
We have about 20 adjuncts regularly in our pool, and so making sure that as they leave, I'm able to find new ones and get them trained and all of that.
Right, get them onboarded. And watching out for occasional student complaints about adjuncts and dealing with those in a fair and effective manner.
Yeah.
And all those things. All right. So I think you just told our listeners you've got about a year left on that.
I do.
I don't know if you have the day countdown.
I do not. I do not.
What will be next? What are you looking forward to doing? Are you going to serve? Well, I'm going to put you on the spot. Are you going to serve as department chair?
It depends on timing. So we have a little bit of a lag in the way that our associate chair and chair terms line up. So I don't know if the listeners know, but Eric was our last department chair, and instead of 3 years, he actually served for 4 years. And so while he and that
penalty box,
the associate chair that served together came on at the same time, he served an additional year while she took a sabbatical and now is serving as chair. And so it's all about timing. If she decides after her 3 years that she is done, then I will step up and serve a 3-year term as chair. If she decides that she wants to serve for 2 terms, which is a possibility, you can serve for 2 terms. She wants to do 6 years. Then if that happens, then that happens. And at that point, I don't know that I would serve as chair after she served for 6 years, because I'm eyeing retirement. And I don't know that I want to, do my swan song at the university as chair and then immediately retire. So timing wise, I don't know. If she does 3, yes. If she does 6, ?
Is there a timeline on that retirement? I mean, you strike me as let's put it this way, farther away from retirement than I am.
Yes.
But do you have the draft of the next chapter that you're just waiting to write after you retire?
Yeah.
What is that? Can you share it?
So the date varies. So my husband and I get on his case about this all the time. For about the past 8 years, he's been saying, we're going to retire early in 8 to 10 years. And I was like, okay, at some point, the clock needs to start ticking backwards. Why are we still at 8 to 10 years, 8 years?
Am I getting him in trouble by talking about this topic?
No.
Okay.
He knows.
He knows he's in trouble?
He knows he's in trouble.
Okay.
And there are a lot of factors that go into that.
Obviously.
We've got 3 parents that live here. We've got responsibilities, bills, economy, right? All kinds of things that go into that. Our plan is at this point, it's changed numerous times, but at this point, our plan is actually to move to Southern Utah and to do our swan song there. What that's going to look like exactly will probably depend on the age that we retire and whether we're able to draw from retirement. Probably not, right? I'm probably going to be retiring before, because we would be eligible at 67, and I really don't want to be here until I'm 67.
So it just strikes me as I'm listening to you. What if you became a telecommuting faculty member? Would you move to Utah sooner rather than later? And just maybe you think you've got 4 more years of work left in you before you get to whatever age you prefer to retire. But the both of you want to be in Southern Utah as soon as possible. Would you consider doing that? Or is it being face to face too important for you to?
I would do that. I mean, this is probably not going to sound great, but the sole reason we haven't already done that, because my husband's a PA, he can easily get a job in
physician's assistant.
Yeah, in Southern Utah, doing what he does here. He's in orthopedics. There's a lot of retired folks in Southern Utah that see orthopedics for new hips, knees, blah, blah, blah.
Bone issues. Yeah,
right.
Sure.
So he would not have a problem getting a job down there. We've got, as I just said, we've got 3 aging parents that are here that refuse to move anywhere else. And so as we are increasingly dealing with their health issues, it does not make sense for us to uproot and have to just keep flying back here to help them navigate their health challenges. And so since he is a physician's assistant, he is kind of the family doctor, and that's who they call when they have any issue. And so they have both made it clear that, he is in charge of their healthcare and he better be here to oversee that.
It's a lot of family pressure.
Every time we go on a vacation, right? I mean, it's getting to the point that they don't even want us to leave town to go on a vacation because they're so afraid something's going to happen. And invariably it usually does, because I think they just get so worked up that he's not in town. And so we value our families. We want to be there to support them. And it doesn't make sense. Otherwise, I would already probably be telecommuting. I would miss the in-person aspect. I definitely would.
The telecommuting is an interesting double-edged sword.
Yeah.
We both have a colleague, Jen Weaver, who hopefully she listens to this episode, who 2 or 3 years ago now, she is a full-time faculty member in our department. She's a tenured associate professor, and she wanted to move to Oregon with her family to work from there. Her husband also happens to work at Boise State. And the department worked to support that. We have a telecommuting policy. The university has a telecommuting policy. But she happened to be in town for back to school stuff last week. And I just told her, I'm so happy for you to be living your life stream and being in Oregon with your family closer to your parents or to your mother. But I miss you being here. Yeah. I miss you being face to face. I miss seeing you in the hallway or walking past your office when the door's open and saying hi and just, being friendly. And so I respect the notion that people want to telecommute, either if they're not doing it already, but at the same time, it is different.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say better or worse. It's just different, don't you think?
It is. I mean, when I've taught during the COVID years, right, we taught a lot of online. And when I've taught online classes, I don't prefer that to in person. I definitely prefer in person. But that's just me. It's the stage thing, I think, right? I like to be up on the stage. I like to have that interaction. I like to be able to see my students as we're talking about information, have them be able to ask questions right then and there and not be watching a recorded video. But that's just my style. I really would miss that in-person interaction.
Yeah, you didn't say it quite this way. I'll talk about it from my own perspective. There there's ego in this. There's ego in going into a classroom and being the expert and having people call you Dr. Landrum or Dr. Pritchard, and having that command of that there are, for me, a ton of ego strokes in that. And I do think there are online instructors who approximate that with time and practice. I just haven't had enough time and enough practice.
For me, it's connection.
Okay.
I really,
that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't feel nearly as connected to my students in online courses as I do my in-person courses. And for a few years now, right, since COVID, I've been trying to figure out how do you replicate that in an online environment. And I think I've gotten closer, but it's still not the same.
Yeah, I haven't figured it out. And there's not a lot of me that wants to figure it out at this point in time because it's just not a necessity.
Yeah.
So, all right, Mary, you've been very generous with your time. We're approaching the end here. And so I have a 2-part question for you.
Okay.
Let me see. I want to make sure I get it accurate and ask it in a way that makes sense. Looking back on your academic professional career, would you do it again? Or would you change anything?
Okay. Is that part one, or is that the two?
That's both of them.
Okay.
So part of me wants to ask, would you do it all over again? And the other part of me wants to ask, do you regret anything? What would you do differently if you had to do it over again? Or maybe there's nothing, and that maybe answers both.
I think I'm going to get philosophical here. I think everything happens for a reason. And I think that had I not done the exact journey that I did in the way that I did it, I wouldn't be where I am today. And I like where I am today. And so while there are some bumps in the road of things that have happened in my career that weren't great and that I wish I didn't have to go through, the reason I left my previous job was that my then boss was trying to steal my research. I mean, there are some things that happened that were not great to live through. And yet, I'm also kind of grateful that happened because I'm here.
Interesting. Yeah. It's so hard, I think, for today's students to understand that concept. You and I both know that our students these days, they're panic-stricken, they're anxiety-riddled about their future. They want to make the perfect first step after college, whether it's going into the workplace or going to graduate school. They, for whatever reason, they have this notion of doing everything perfectly.
Yeah.
And the students that I talk to, it actually paralyzes them. They get analysis paralysis. They have a difficulty making a choice because they put so much pressure, or maybe it's parents or peers. I don't know. I'm not quite sure. But what's refreshing from what you just said is that even the mistakes, even the hardships that were hard at the time ended up leading you to a place that you appreciate.
Yeah.
I don't think many of today's students understand that hardships or failures or difficulties are okay.
Yeah.
That they want to minimize those, and of course they do. But I think you're living proof by your own admission, it all comes out in the wash.
It all comes out in the wash, and if you don't have the struggle, you don't actually grow. That's just my philosophy, because when things are going great, where's your motivation to do things differently? It's not until you're on the hot seat or going through a challenge or dealing with something that you just really don't want to be dealing with that you have to get creative and figure things out and find strength and resiliency and all of those wonderful qualities that we know improve our mental health. If life was puppy dogs and roses, awesome, but you probably wouldn't ever grow as a person.
Yeah, does it have to be puppy dogs? I mean, could we?
You could do unicorns. That would also be acceptable. Flowers.
I'm good with you. Puppies are such a hassle,
Yeah, well, that's your viewpoint.
Yeah.
How about all diet Mountain Dew? That would be but would you want, so would you want your world to be all Diet Mountain Dew all the time and have no other options? You can say yes if you want to.
I think I'm okay with that. But I think the larger picture, although this is a convoluted example now, the larger picture is, if I didn't have access to my dearly beloved Diet Mountain Dew, it might help me grow stronger. That forced adaptation to a world without joy anymore would actually make me stronger and better. And I think, I suspect we both agree on this. I don't know. You can answer for yourself. But I think we learn from our failures more than we learn from our successes.
Yeah.
When we do something wrong or make a mistake and we get positive correction about it, that's actually the growth potential. I think you said it differently a couple of minutes ago. If everything's going well for you, you don't know what to do next. There's some lack of direction there. You just keep plugging along, doing the same old thing because it's working for you. But there could be something better out there, but it might take some hurdles to get there, like a failure or like a redirect or like mom and dad sending you to a tutor for algebra, just because you got an A- and not an A+.
It was a B+, but anyway.
A B+.
Yeah.
I am sorry to bring back that painful memory. We're coming full circle.
Yeah.
So Mary, thank you very much for your time. I know you're crazy busy. I mean, the associate chair plus all the other things you do on campus keeps you crazy busy. People like to think that I'm crazy busy. I'm not. I'm no longer the chair. I have time for bonbons and putting my feet up in my office. And so thank you for your time.
You're welcome. And I still think you're crazy busy, but you just get to choose how you spend your time more than you did when you were chair.
Maybe that's true. And for our listening audience, let's just go with that.
Okay, we'll go with that.
All right. Thank you so much.
Psych Sessions can do what it does because of listeners like you. We want to thank you for your support over the years in our mission to get more free professional development to all teachers of psychology around the world. If you want to support us further by making a tax-deductible donation, please head to psychsessions.org/donations. Thanks for listening.